Hey guys, today we are going to be reviewing the concept of multiplying and dividing by tens, hundreds, and thousands. So, just as a reminder, when we multiply by 10, remember we are moving over one place value because every place value is 10 times bigger than the place value next to it. So, one way we can do that is we can just move the decimal one time to the right. So in the number 62, you'll notice we don't have a decimal, but if it's a whole number, it's always going to be at the end. If I move it over once to the right, which is here, I'll have an empty space, put a zero in that empty space. I can erase where the decimal was before, and I get a new number. That means that 62 times 10 is 620. Now, when I multiply by 100, that's the same thing as multiplying by 10 two times. If you multiply any number by 10 two times, that's the same thing as multiplying that number by 100. Because of that, we can just move this number over, this decimal over two place values. 1, 2. Each time we're multiplying by 10. Fill in two zeros there. Again, move where the decimal was, and we're going to write down where it is now. So I can say that 62 times 100 is 6,200. That's the same as multiplying that number by 100. Now, same thing with 1,000. That's the same thing as multiplying by 10 three times. Again, I can just move the place value over three times. 1, 2, 3 times, each time multiplying by 10. So 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000. I put three zeros in my place, put a decimal there at the end, and I end up with 62,000, which is the same as multiplying that number by 1,000. Now, the same idea works if you have decimals. So again, if I was this first one, notice we already have decimals in each of these. I'd move it over once. So this would give me 75. Here, multiplying by 100, that's the same thing as multiplying by 10 twice. So I'll move it over twice. I get 750. And here, multiplying by 1,000 is the same as multiplying by 10 three times. So that's going to be 7,500. So it makes it really quick to multiply by tens, hundreds, and thousands. Now, same idea, guys, when we're dividing. When you're dividing, you're just going to do the opposite. You're going down one place value. So we're going to move the decimal in the opposite direction to the left. So if I have 82 divided by 10, a whole number, so the decimal is going to be at the end, I'm going to move it back one time, and it's going to give me 8 and 2/10. Dividing by 100 is the same thing as dividing a number by 10 twice. So I'm going to move it back 1, 2 times, and we get 0 and 82 hundredths. And if I divide by 1,000, that's the same thing as dividing by 10 three times. So I'll go 1, 2, 3 times, and that is going to be the same as 0 and 82 thousandths. So dividing and multiplying by tens can be quick and easy. Now, we can use this concept when we go to multiply and divide with decimals. Really quickly, if we have a decimal and a whole number, I can multiply this decimal to get into a whole number. So 3 and 5/10, if I move the decimal over once, that's the same thing as multiplying that number by 10. That gives me 35 times 41. So I would take 35 times 41, but because I multiplied by 10, I know my answer is going to be 10 times bigger than I really want it to be. So to make up for that, we can, and when we get our answer, whatever this answer is, we will divide it by 10. Or in other words, we will move the decimal back one time. All right, same idea here. Notice here I have two decimals, so I'm going to, in this case, make them both into whole numbers. So I'm going to move this over twice. 7 and 25 hundredths. If I multiply that by 100, it's going to give me 725. Same idea here. I'm going to move it over once, though. That's the same as multiplying by 10. It's going to give me 21. So now notice I have two whole numbers to use, 725 and 21. I multiply these two numbers. Now the difference here is because I multiplied by 100 in the beginning and multiplied the other number by 10, that means I'm going to be 100 times bigger and then an additional 10 times bigger. So I know 100 times 10 is 1,000. So, the same as moving the decimal twice. So I'm going to, in the end, divide by 1,000, move it back twice. And again, the same thing works when we're dividing, the exact same thing. So if I have a decimal divided by a whole number, I can move that decimal over 2 times. That's like multiplying by 100. I will take 2,412 divided by 4. And because my answer is 100 times bigger than it should be, I can divide by 100. So this idea of multiplying and dividing by tens, hundreds, and thousands can make our lives a lot easier. So think about how we can use this and think about why it makes sense.